Order, please. Before we begin with the daily routine, there's a couple of items of other business that has to be looked after. So first of all, I recognize the Honourable Premier, who will present to the House the newly elected member for Preston.
Mr. Speaker, I present to you the Honourable Twyla Gross, the member for the Electoral District of Preston. She has taken the oath, signed the rolls, and now claims the right to take her seat.
Let the honourable member take her seat. Congratulations. Indeed, welcome, and you really don't know what you're in for. But it's fun. It's fun. Another thing that I'd like to do, it gives me the great honor of doing, would be to draw to the members' attention to the Speaker's Gallery for an introduction of some very special guests. I met with the guests this morning, and we're pleased to see them here in the legislature this afternoon. Today we are joined by Angus Robertson, MSP, Scotland's Cabinet Secretary for Constitution, External Affairs and Culture, accompanied by his private secretary, Andrew McDivitt. I'm going to ask as I call their names that they please stand. And John Devine, Head of Scottish Affairs for Canada at the Scottish Government Office in Canada, accompanied by Leslie Gray and Stuart Adam and Sabrina Lemieux, also Scottish Affairs at the Scottish Government Office in Canada. It's my pleasure to welcome you on behalf of all the members of the Nova Scotia House of Assembly, and thank you for coming to visit. Please stand and recognize the warm-up. Once again, welcome. Now comes the hard part. The easy part's over. As most of you are aware, I'm going to be stepping down as Speaker of the Nova Scotia Legislature this afternoon. I've given it a lot of consideration over time, and I've even spoken to the media about it. I'm going to be 71 years old on October 24th. But I may be resigning as Speaker of this House, but I still have 2 more years to go on my mandate. I have a commitment to my constituents that I'm going to honour, God willing. So with that, I hereby resign as Speaker of the Nova Scotia House of Assembly, and I ask the member for Shelburne to assume the role of Deputy Speaker.
I will now accept nominations for candidates for election of the Speaker of the House of Assembly. I recognize the Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I nominate the member for Pictou West for election as the Speaker of this House of Assembly.
Does the Honourable Member accept this nomination?
Yes, I do.
Are there any further nominations? I recognize the Honourable Member for Dartmouth North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby nominate the honourable member for Halifax Citadel, Sable Island to be Speaker. Thank you.
Does the Honourable Member accept the nomination?
Yes, I do.
Are there any further nominations? Seeing none, I'll ask for the Chief Clerk to conduct a vote for the election of the Speaker.
Thank you. We'll just take a very brief recess to set up for the vote for the new Speaker. Thank you. Order. Order. So we will now begin with the vote. please return to the chamber, and the clerks and I will go to the clerk's office with the House leaders to count the ballots, and we will return to announce the winner of the election. Thank you. We'll take a brief recess.
Order. Order. I recognize the Chief Clerk.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. So we've conducted the election, and we do have one candidate who received a clear majority of votes. So I declare the member for Pictou West elected the new Speaker of the House.
Thank you. To the honorable members of the House of Assembly, I thank the House for this tremendous great honor that you have bestowed upon me. I promise I will do my very best to uphold the prestige and high tradition of the Speaker's office. I respectfully ask the assistance, of course, and cooperation of all members. And I know that we have a busy agenda here today, and when we begin the House routine later, I will comment further. But right now, I know that we have people waiting, so I believe for now, I just want to say thank you to everyone. This is a great honor, and I will continue my remarks later. Let his honor be admitted.
His Honor, the Lieutenant Governor, please rise. It is the wish of His Honor, the Lieutenant Governor, that everyone present be seated.
May it please Your Honor. The House of Assembly, agreeable to Your Honor's command, has proceeded to the choice of a Speaker and has elected Carol McFarlane, member of the electoral district of Pictou West, to that office, and by its direction I present her for your approbation of Your Honor.
I approve of the Speaker whom the House of Assembly has chosen.
Your Honor's ready approval of the choice with which I have been honored by the House, having constituted me in due form Speaker of the House of Assembly, it has now become my duty, in the name of the representatives of His Majesty's loyal subjects, the people of the province, respectfully to demand all their accustomed rights and privileges, and that they shall have freedom of speech in their debates, that they may be free from arrest during their attendance in Parliament, and that I, as their Speaker, may have free access to Your Honor's person.
I most cheerfully grant your request.
All rise.
So order. I would like to let everyone know that we are going to shortly, after a few comments I make, that we will begin question period immediately. And so just to give everyone a heads up, but I did want to say today that it's a real privilege. I'm really nervous, but my father always said, if you're not nervous, you're not ready. And, you know, so the reality is that being in this position comes with great responsibility, and I take it very seriously. Very, very seriously. I've had the privilege to be in the seat for, not this seat, but in the chamber for 10 years and have watched many members of this House, and I have learned a lot, and it has brought me what I consider a lot of wisdom. I do want to obviously thank the Premier for nominating me and trusting that for me to be in this role. As well as I think today is a day for all Nova Scotians of all genders, to be able to see themselves in this role. And that certainly has been something that I have always wanted to achieve, is to ensure that anyone coming behind me can see themselves in this position. And I feel very excited to be able to be in this position. And I guess for me to be here today and know that there's so much support within this chamber as well as outside the chamber. And I must say a big, big thank you to the member, to the past speaker, for his dedication. They're big, jovial, and you know, fair shoes to fill. You've been a great friend, a mentor for the last 10 years, and I consider myself to be very, very lucky to call you a good friend. So thank you again for all your work. Today is a busy day for all of you, and many of you have friends and family here. I don't have my family here today. It seemed to be a little bit chaotic to bring them in today, even though we are making history. But you know, I'm always reminded by my father just to sort of remain humble. And as he said, well, there's no sense coming down the first day, nothing's sure yet. So, I was like, okay, well, I'll have you down next week. So I look forward to having my friends and family and staff and everyone here next week, where I can give them an opportunity to meet all of you, and for me to be able to say, you know, we all know that there's a force behind each and every one of us for our accomplishments. We all know that success is plural. It's not singular. And so today is a good day for all Nova Scotians. And I want to just welcome everyone that's in the gallery for being here today. It's a day I hope that we will all remember. And I'll just finish off with a little meme that was sent to me before I came in here, and it was basically just saying that, you know, watch out, everyone, get your shoes on, because the floor is full of glass. So, yeah. I recognize the Honourable House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and certainly the floor is full of class with you at our chair. This is an historical day, and so proud to have you as the Speaker of this House. I now ask for unanimous consent of the House to revert back to daily routine. motion.
Okay. Yep. I recognize the Honorable House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Let's do this again. So I ask for unanimous consent of the House to revert back to daily routine until after notices of motion. Yeah.
Is it agreed? Unanimous? Granted. Thank you. So we go to, so will we go right into? Order. So we will begin the daily routine as we see things really change quickly around here. So we will start with presenting and reading of petitions. Okay. Presenting reports of committees. Tabling reports, regulations, and other papers. I recognize the honourable member from Cumberland North.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to table a point of order.
Thank you. I believe at this point we will have Nolan. The paper is tabled. Statements by ministers. I recognize the Honourable Premier.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to make a simple statement. The PC Party stands with Israel. We condemn in the strongest possible terms the horrifying acts of terror Hamas visited upon Israel beginning on Saturday. Not since the Holocaust has there been such a large number of Jews killed in a single day. Babies, grandparents, Holocaust survivors, peace activists, all murdered in senseless acts of imaginable terror. 3 of them Canadians. We were horrified to learn of the hundreds of Israelis who were murdered, raped, and abducted. We were shocked by the stories of bodies of murdered civilians being paraded through the streets, morbid trophies robbed of their dignity. The actions of Hamas terrorists were brutal, sickening, heartbreaking, and completely unacceptable. Madam Speaker, in these dark times, we must cling to the belief that good will triumph over evil, that terror will not prevail, and that the resilient Israeli people will overcome these challenges as they have so many other times. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. I now recognize the official opposition leader.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and congratulations on your election to the chair. Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, I'd like to thank the Premier for his comments and for providing those to our caucus in advance. I'd also like to stand and condemn the actions that took place in Israel. Thousands of people in Israel awoke to devastating acts of terrorism this past weekend. And we fully condemn the actions of terrorist groups such as Hamas and violent acts against the Jewish people. We know so many Nova Scotians are personally impacted by these terrible events, and our heart goes out to the victims abroad and their families and friends here in Nova Scotia. We in our caucus certainly stand with the victims and stand with the State of Israel against these acts of terror and stand firmly committed to the ultimate goal of peace, safety, and security in Israel and the Middle East. Thank you.
I recognize the Honourable Leader of the New Democratic Party.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Nova Scotia NDP caucus condemns the brutal and terrifying attacks by Hamas in Israel last Saturday. We stand with all Nova Scotians and those around the world who are grieving and worried for their friends and family in the region. The violence visited upon innocent civilians in the last number of days is heartbreaking and horrifying. Deadly and targeted attacks on any civilians are never justified. Terrorism and violence against civilians is unacceptable, and we mourn the lives lost. We will continue to resist and work actively to address the rising tone of hate, anti-Semitism, and Islamophobia we've seen around the globe following these attacks. As leaders in Nova Scotia, in times like these, we must act with compassion and empathy. Having spoken with many people with loved ones in the region, and as a grandchild of Holocaust survivors with family ties to the region, I can attest that the trauma experienced by people here at home is real and acute. The world must stand firm and focused on ending the cycle of violence and ensuring the safe release of hostages.
I recognize the Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, since we last met here at Province House, Nova Scotians have endured natural disasters that reminded us of the overwhelming power of nature. But we are also reminded of the strength, humanity, and extraordinary resilience of Nova Scotians. At the end of May, unprecedented wildfires swept through Tantallon and Barrington Lake. 22,000 people were displaced. 219 homes were destroyed. 141 homes were damaged. Just 2 months later, severe thunderstorms in July brought more than 250 millimeters of rain to the hardest hit parts of the province, causing damage to roads, homes, and bridges, and the tragic loss of 4 souls. Then, only 2 months after the floods, post-tropical storm Lee made landfall in our province, bringing high winds and rain and destruction with it. For thousands of Nova Scotians, the last 6 months have been filled with uncertainty and often fear. But through it all, we could count on one group of people to be there when we needed them and make things a little less frightening. Of course, I'm talking about our first responders. I had the incredible privilege of shaking hands with many of these heroes, looking them in the eye and thanking them for everything that they were doing to help their fellow Nova Scotians. It was an honor that meant a lot to me. And Madam Speaker, it's difficult to think of a time when I was more proud than spending time with our first responders in these instances. Madam Speaker, our first responders worked long hours in the most difficult conditions. They risked their own lives to save others. And in many cases, while they worked, their own homes were being threatened and their families were being displaced. It takes a very special kind of person to be a first responder. And in Nova Scotia, we are blessed to have thousands of them. I thank God every day for that. First responders are there for us during huge events like fires, floods, and hurricanes. But we also count on them to be there when we need them, every day, every night. I know they do what they do because of their compassion and their drive to help other people. They certainly don't do it for praise or recognition, but they deserve our highest praise and our most sincere respect and our deepest gratitude. During this fall sitting of the legislature, I asked members to join me in saluting Nova Scotia's first responders with special recognition. That recognition will take many forms, but in the end, it comes down to one thing. Our first responders are everyday heroes who do extraordinary things. They put others before themselves, and they run towards danger when others run away. Today and every day, I extend my heartfelt thanks to each and every one of them. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I recognize the Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. I'd like to thank the Premier for his comments and providing a copy in advance. And I'm also very appreciative of the opportunity to stand and rise in my place to take a moment to recognize the bravery and sacrifice of our first responders who courageously responded to Hurricane Fiona, post-tropical storm Lee, the largest wildfires in our province's history that blazed across our province, and also who responded to the overwhelming and tragic floods that impacted the lives of many in Nova Scotia. I do want to take a moment to recognize the victims of these horrific events and express our thoughts, condolences, and best wishes to them and their families. Our thoughts, of course, remain with the families who lost loved ones in Windsor, as well as those who lost their homes in Tantallon and Shelburne County and who are now trying to build back their lives. Madam Speaker, our first responders in this province risk their own lives to save others constantly, and we are forever grateful for them and the bravery they have and continue to show. I also had the great honor of visiting the headquarters of some of our first responders who were particularly fighting the blazes in Shelburne County. And as representatives and leaders, we owe it to Nova Scotians to work to ensure that our emergency systems are empowered and first responders have additional resources and assets required to do their job safely and to maximize the opportunity for a successful outcome. Finally, I want to thank all Nova Scotians who stepped up and helped their community during these very difficult times. Once again, during these times of great tragedy and loss, the people of this province show up and help their communities, whether it's getting clothed, getting fed, and standing behind our first responders. And a great testament to the work, I know, in my part of the province of our first responders and our firefighters. When you're driving up the 103, you'll see acres and acres of scorched earth, trees that are burnt down, but you see houses still standing. And that is a result of our firefighters who stood by those houses and protected them during what was a really terrifying and overwhelming situation. For that, I thank them.
I recognize the honourable member and leader of the New Democratic Party.
Thank you. Muhammad Ali once said, "Service to others is the rent you pay for your room here on earth." And there are some people who pay that rent twice, and then over and over again. And those are, of course, our first responders. This year has been terrifying for our province, as has been said, and first responders have again and again risen to the challenge. Thousands of Nova Scotians and communities have stepped up to help, and oftentimes putting themselves in harm's way. These are the Nova Scotians on the front lines of wildfires, floods, emergency departments. They are the people driving the ambulances, the fire trucks, standing at bedsides, paramedics, nurses, search and rescue, volunteer and career firefighters, police officers, and others. There were also, as has been said, so many neighbors and community members who banded together in these times to cook, clean up, knock on doors, and respond in their own ways to support their communities and to support their first responders. And they all continue to respond because that's what they do. It's imperative to recognize and thank them for what they are, and that is heroes. And I appreciate the opportunity to do so. We also need to put actions behind those recognitions and those thanks. And based on my conversations with first responders across the province, they don't actually care about recognition. What they want to be is safe, equipped, and able to do the work that they put themselves in harm's way to do. They want job protection. They want appropriate benefits. They want appropriate support. They want health and safety protections. They want to be supported in the work that they do for us. These kinds of weather events are going to continue. Climate change is real. And just as they always have, first responders will be there to get us through. And for that, today and every day, we thank them and we honor them.
Statements by ministers. Are there any other statements by ministers? Government notices of motion. I recognize the Honourable Minister for Natural Resources.
Thank you very much, and congratulations, Speaker. It's an honor. It's a wonderful day here to celebrate. Speaker, I beg leave to make some introductions before my motion.
Granted.
Speaker, I'd like to draw the members' attention to the Speaker's Gallery. Joined with us here today are some familiar faces that we all got to know over two and a half weeks in May and June Every day at 3 o'clock, we had Scott and the Daves show up on our TV, and it was a little bit of a running joke within the department that, anybody remember the kids in the hall? Well, these are the Daves I know. And they did a fantastic job of keeping us informed and keeping us protected. And before I read my motion, I'd like to recognize first and foremost Scott Tingley, our manager for forest protections. If you just take a stand. And at each scene, we had information officers, Dave Rockwood in Shelburne and Dave Steves in the Tantallon fire. And also at each fire, Speaker, we had incident commanders taking the role and leading the fight with all the other responders. Jay McKinnon served in that role in Shelburne. And of course, if you're familiar with any emergency services, this name comes as no surprise. Served as the incident commander for Tantallon and then put his services towards the fires in Shelburne, Paul Schnurr. And back at our home base, the whole team's led by somebody in Shubenacadie by the name of Jim Rutterham, who kept everything together and recognized it. Also, Speaker, before I do read this notice of motion, we had a co-op student in our department that had a unique experience to work with the wildfires during some of the summer. And that student is a PR student at Mount St. Vincent. Emma's here with us today, and thank you for preparing this notice of motion, Emma. So I hereby give notice on a future day that I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Nova Scotia was devastated by historic wildfires in June, displacing thousands in Shelburne County and Tantallon area and forever changing the lives of people whose homes were destroyed. And whereas our Nova Scotia wildland firefighters, our helicopter water bombers, our municipal and volunteer fire departments, and our ground search and rescue teams all answered the call to fight these fires, along with the resources lent to us by our neighbors. And whereas, while crews worked tirelessly through tough conditions to get these fires under control and then extinguish them completely, Nova Scotians showed their compassion and solidarity with an outpouring support of thanks to our first responders and support for the people who displaced or their homes. And therefore be it resolved that all members of this House recognize the combined effort of municipal organizations and the mounted of a large-scale response to battle these blazes, protect our communities, and support everyone affected. And some of these members, Speaker, also went west when the call was needed after our fires were put out. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Aye. Contrary minded? Nay. Nay? The motion is carried. Are there any other government notices of motion? Introduction of bills. I recognize the Honourable Premier.
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act Respecting a Memorial Day to Honour First Responders.
The Honourable Premier begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act Respecting a Memorial Day to Honour First Responders.
Bill 319, An Act Respecting a Memorial Day to Honour First Responders.
Ordered that the bill be read a second time on a future day. Introduction of bills. I recognize the honourable member for Municipal Affairs and Housing.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I just wish to make an introduction first.
Absolutely.
So in the gallery behind me in the bright orange shirt, we have Peter Roberts, who is a member of Valley Search and Rescue and a former volunteer firefighter and one of the instigators of the idea that we should have a day to honor first responders. So I'd like to welcome Peter to the House. So, Madam Speaker, and again, it's my first opportunity to address you, and I want to congratulate you on your new role. Don't want to miss that. But I beg leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 9 of the Acts of 2019, the Tourist Accommodation Registration Act.
The honourable member for Municipal Affairs and Housing begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 9 of the Acts of 2019, the Tourist Accommodations Registration Act.
Bill 320, an act to amend Chapter 9 of the Acts of 2019, the Tourist Accommodations Registration Act.
Order that the bill be read a second time on a future day. I recognize the honourable member for the Department of Education.
Merci, Madame Présidente. Je désire présenter un projet de loi intitulé Loi concernant le Conseil scolaire acadien provincial. Madam Speaker, I beg leave to introduce an act respecting the Conseil scolaire acadien provincial.
The honourable member for the Department of Education begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act Respecting the Conseil scolaire acadien provincial.
Bill 321, an act respecting the Conseil scolaire acadien provincial, loi concernant le Conseil scolaire acadien provincial.
Order that the bill be read a second time on a future day. I now recognize the honourable member and minister for the Department of Health and Wellness.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and as my other colleagues have said, it is an absolute honour to congratulate you and address you in that chair today. So, Madam Speaker, I beg leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 4 of the Acts of 2020, the Opioid Damages and Health Care Cost Recovery Act.
Thank you. The honourable member for the Department of Health and Wellness begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 4 of the Acts of 2020, the Opioid Damages and Health Care Costs Recovery Act.
Bill 322, an act to amend Chapter 4 of the Acts of 2020, the Opioid Damages and Health Care Costs Recovery Act.
Ordered that the bill be read for a second time on a future day. I recognize the Honourable Minister for Health and Wellness.
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Provide a Common Legislative Foundation for Regulated Health Professions.
The honourable member, Minister for Health and Wellness, begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Provide a Common Legislative Foundation for Regulated Health Professions.
Bill 323, an act to provide a common legislative foundation for regulated health professions.
Ordered that the bill be read a second time on a future day. I recognize the Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I beg leave to introduce a bill entitled an act to reduce the qualifying threshold for the Canada-Nova Scotia Targeted Housing Benefit Rent Supplement Program.
Thank you. The Honourable Leader for the Official Opposition begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Reduce the Qualifying Threshold for the Canadian Nova Scotia Targeted Housing Benefit Rent Supplement Program.
Bill 324, an act to reduce the qualifying threshold for the Canada-Nova Scotia Targeted Housing Benefit Rent Supplement Program.
Ordered that the bill be read a second time on a future day. I recognize the official leader of the NDP party.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, I beg leave to introduce an act entitled An Act Respecting Enforcement of the Residential Tenancies Act.
The leader of the NDP party begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act Respecting Enforcement of the Residential Tenancies Act.
Bill 325, an act respecting enforcement of the Residential Tenancies Act.
Ordered that the bill be read a second time in a future day. I recognize the leader of the official opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I beg leave to introduce an act entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 401 of the Revised Statutes of 1989, the Residential Tenancies Act, respecting administration and enforcement.
Oh, thank you.
The leader of the official opposition begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 401 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Residential Tenancies Act, respecting administration and enforcement.
Bill 326, an act to amend Chapter 401 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Residential Tenancies Act, respecting administration and enforcement.
I recognize order. I apologize. I should have said order that the bill be read a second time on a future day. I recognize the Honourable House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I beg leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 293 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Motor Vehicle Act.
Thank you. The Honourable House Leader, Minister for Public Works, begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 293 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Motor Vehicle Act.
Bill 327, an act to amend Chapter 293 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Motor Vehicle Act.
Ordered that the bill be read a second time on a future day. I recognize the Honourable Member for Bedford South.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I beg leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act Respecting Municipal Housing Targets.
Thank you. The Honourable Member for Bedford South begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act Respecting Municipal Housing Targets.
Bill 328, an act respecting municipal housing targets.
Order that the bill be read a second time on a future day. I recognize the Minister for Housing and Municipal Affairs.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 39 of the Acts of 2008, the Halifax Regional Municipality Charter, and Chapter 21 of the Acts of 2021, the Housing in the Halifax Regional Municipality Act respecting housing.
The Honourable Member for Municipal Affairs and Housing begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 39 of the Acts of 2008, the Halifax Regional Municipality Charter, and Chapter 21 of the Acts of 2021, the Housing in the Halifax Regional Municipality Act, respecting housing.
Bill 329, an act to amend Chapter 39 of the Acts of 2008, the Halifax Regional Municipality Charter, and Chapter 21 of the Acts of 2021, the Housing in the Halifax Regional Municipality Act, respecting housing.
Ordered that the bill be read on a second time on a future day. I recognize the Leader of the New Democratic Party.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I beg leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 18 of the Acts of 1998, the Municipal Government Act, and Chapter 39 of the Acts of 2008, the Halifax Regional Municipality Charter, to empower municipalities to tax vacant properties.
The Leader of the New Democratic Party begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 18 of the Acts of 1998, the Municipal Government Act, and Chapter 39 of the Acts of 2008, the Halifax Regional Municipality Charter, to empower municipalities to tax vacant properties.
Bill 330, an act to amend Chapter 18 of the Acts of 1998, the Municipal Government Act, and Chapter 39 of the Acts of 2008, the Halifax Regional Municipality Charter, to empower municipalities to tax vacant properties.
Order that the bill be read a second time on a future day. I recognize the Honourable Member for Halifax Citadel, Sable Island.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I beg leave to table a bill entitled An Act Respecting a Suicide Prevention Strategy.
The Honourable Member from Halifax Citadel, Sable Island begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act Respecting a Suicide Prevention Strategy.
Bill 331, an act respecting a suicide prevention strategy.
Ordered that the bill be read a second time on a future day. There are no further bills. We will now move on to notices of motion. I recognize the Honourable House Leader for the official opposition.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and congratulations to you in your new position as well. Madam Chair, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Honourable Member for Clayton Park West is undergoing chemotherapy treatment, and whereas the Honourable Member is unable to travel to Province House while she's undergoing treatment due to a compromised immune system, and whereas in the best interest of the Honourable Member and her constituents that the Honourable Member be accommodated to enable her to continue to represent her electoral district in the House during the fall sitting, therefore be it resolved that the House of Assembly, 1, authorizes the Honourable Member for Clayton Park West to participate virtually in the proceedings of the House using video conferencing software approved by the Speaker for the duration of the fall 2023 sitting, and 2, directs that resolution number 192 of the first session of the 64th General Assembly applies in respects to the Honourable Member for Clayton Park West for the duration of the 2023 sitting. Madam Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for a waiver. Is it agreed?
Agreed.
It is agreed. Okay. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Aye. Contrary minded? Nay. The motion is carried. Thank you. Oh. I would just like to let the House know as well that that link has been sent to the members so they can log on at any time now. Okay. Notices of motion? Point of order? Point of order. I will allow the member from Cumberland North on a point of order.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise on a point of order with regard to a motion currently on the order paper, Resolution 598 of April the 3rd, 2023.
Sorry to the honourable member from Cumberland North, but I believe that I've been made aware of what this notice is, or point of order. So I'm going to excuse myself from the chair, and I would ask my deputy speaker to please come forward and assume the chair. Deputy.
I recognize the member for Cumberland North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise on a point of order with regard to a motion currently on the order paper. It's resolution number 598 of April the 3rd, 2023. And I ask that the motion be currently found out of order and removed from the order paper in accordance with Section 37 of the House of Assembly rules. With your indulgence and noting that my point of order has been provided to your office and to the three House leaders yesterday, I also tabled it earlier, I would like to put on the record my rationale for this point of order and ask that you take this under consideration and provide a written decision in a timely manner. As briefly as possible, while noting key procedural aspects, I submit the following rationale as to why the resolution 598 is not in order. In addition, I did table a more detailed version of this argument with references to relevant authorities and ask that the tabled version form the basis of my position when you consider this point of order. The resolution states, quote, the member for Cumberland North misled the House and that she not be allowed to take her seat until such a time as she retracts her comments and apologizes, end quote. First, it is submitted that Resolution 598 is unconstitutional. A resolution of this House cannot be in order if the substance of the resolution would be in violation with the Constitution. Specifically, I note Section 17 of the Constitution Act of 1867, Section 9 of the Bill of Rights 1689, and the Supreme Court of Canada's interpretation of freedom of expression. The Constitution of Canada recognizes the parliamentary privileges as defined by the UK House of Commons, United Kingdom House of Commons, at the time of the adoption of the Act of 1867. Those rights and privileges are defined to include freedom of speech. Freedom of speech, as defined in Canada, includes the freedom not to speak or otherwise compelling a member of this House to take an action that requires the member to do something, such as apologize, to which the member is not so inclined. Since the adoption of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms in 1982, Section 2B of the Charter creates a right to freedom of expression. That right has been defined by the Supreme Court of Canada to include the right not to speak or act. Therefore, the law of Canada recognizes freedom of expression to include the freedom not to express. Resolution 598, if passed, would require a member of this House to utter an apology, which would violate my parliamentary privilege of freedom of speech and would be unconstitutional. As such, the resolution is not in order. Secondly, what is being proposed in Resolution 598 is akin to a motion to find a member in contempt of the House. Since the House of Assembly rules are silent as to how such matters are raised, it is incumbent on this House to consider how such matters are addressed by the Canadian House of Commons standing orders and the standing orders and practices of the United Kingdom's House of Commons. Under the Canadian House of Commons procedures, the raising of a matter of contempt by a member acknowledges that such a motion must state that the matter, if the motion is passed, will be sent to the appropriate committee in charge of issues of privilege for investigation. In precedents dating back to the 19th century, the House of Commons has routinely dealt with matters of a question of contempt of a member by way of a motion to refer the issue to a committee for investigation. In addition, as noted in Maingot's parliamentary immunity in Canada, it is the standard procedure that a motion to find a member in contempt, if passed, shall go to a committee of the House for investigation and recommendation. A similar approach has been standardized in the United Kingdom's House of Commons as well. Since Resolution 598 does not provide for the issue to be sent to a committee for investigation, I submit the resolution is out of order. Third, Resolution 598 is out of order because it does not allow the member to whom an accusation of contempt has been made to have the right to respond to such an accusation in accordance with procedural fairness or the principles of natural justice. In short, Resolution 598 does not give the accused his or her day in court. In this case, the House. That would mean a hearing conducted by the Committee on Internal Affairs in which the accused member could testify, have the right to counsel, and otherwise respond to the accusations made in a motion for contempt. Again, the House rules are silent on this issue, but we can turn to the practices and procedures of the United Kingdom's House of Commons to see that the procedural fairness has been accepted as an integral component of an investigation in the accusation of contempt by a member. As noted in Erskine May in 1999 and in 2013, United Kingdom's House of Commons committees looking into this issue confirmed the need for procedural fairness when a member is facing potential suspension. And fourth, Mr. Speaker, it is submitted that Resolution 598 is out of order and cannot be placed on the order paper for possible calling for debate, because such a motion must take precedence over other debates in the House. Since the resolution has not been called for debate for more than 6 months, the motion is out of order for not being debated and the accusation of contempt being adjudicated by this House and its Committee on Internal Affairs in a timely manner. In short, a resolution making an accusation of contempt must be debated forthwith, and if not, it is out of order as a result of the delay. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I raise this point of order because there is something inherently inappropriate about a motion in this House that, if debated and passed, would allow for a member of this House to be suspended indefinitely with no opportunity to defend oneself or to have the matter adjudicated by a committee of this House. If this motion is in order, it begs the question, what is stopping this government, or any government for that matter, from using its parliamentary majority to systematically move a motion to suspend a member from the House indefinitely against every member of this opposition in order to eliminate the opposition bench? a key tenet of the democratic system. Mr. Speaker, I ask that you take into consideration these arguments, and I ask your indulgence to reserve your decision on this point of order until a written decision can be produced. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the motion in question is on the order paper because the former Speaker made the decision to allow it to be placed on the order paper. As you know, Mr. Speaker, questioning a decision of the Speaker, as the member has done in her speech, is not allowed. Bosque and Gagnon on page 268 are clear on this point. Prior to 1965, the rulings of the Speakers were subject to appeal and could be overturned by the House. Since then, members have not been allowed to challenge decisions of the chair. Mr. Speaker, the rules are clear on this matter. No written decision is required, and I urge you to dismiss this point of order and allow the House to get on with its important business. Thank you.
I recognize the Honourable Member for Bedford Basin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will speak only briefly on this. I think the Honourable Member made a number of legitimate points that we should all be thinking very carefully about our privileges here in this House. And in fact, we just saw a Speaker get sworn in. And when that Speaker was sworn in, she pledged to uphold the accustomed rights and privileges of the members in this House. And one of those includes the right to free speech. In addition, whenever we have a complaint, and I think members will remember back a couple of sessions ago where one of the cabinet ministers on the other side referred to three women on this side as witches, and I went to the Speaker immediately with that. It was dealt with the next day. I brought that forward, then the Speaker issued his ruling after that. But that came forward right away. It was dealt with. I brought it forward. It was dealt with. It was not lying over someone's head forever as a motion on the table. I laid my complaint with the Speaker, and we moved on from there. This is an intimidation tactic, which we're all getting really familiar with in this House. The government hears something they don't like, and the next thing you know, you're bullied in some way. The member is calling this tactic for what it is. It's inappropriate. It should not happen in this House. The people of her riding elected her. They sent her here, and it is not up to us to prevent her from doing her job for great lengths of time. We have removed, I was here when we removed a member of the House. That member had been convicted of a crime. It was appropriate in that case. This is not appropriate. You can disagree with the member if you like. You may be unhappy, and I can tell you as a minister, you often put up with a lot of cheap shots, unfair things said about you from the other side of the House. But to go to this length is inappropriate, unfair, and all members of this House should be concerned about their rights and the rights of their constituents who actually sent us here. Thank you.
I recognize the Honourable Member for Dartmouth South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to address the point of order by the member for Cumberland North and the resolution which it concerns, which is on the order paper because it was put forward by the government side in order to force an apology from a member of the opposition, the penalty for which was removal from the House. So let's be clear about what we're talking about. At the heart of this is whether MLAs should be restricted in their speech on the floor of this House. And I think it's clear that our speech is protected in this space. We can argue for or against a government bill. We can throw cheap shots if they're not unparliamentary. We can take cheap shots if we are in a position where we are so lucky to be a minister of the Crown and be required to absorb contrary opinion. And we're not just free to do this, but we're actually required to. That is our job in many ways in this chamber. And lots of times, members will take issue with what is said. They will take issue with the veracity of what is said. Anyone who's been here for any period of time has been involved in those conversations and speakers' rulings. But when they come to a vote, particularly in the case of a majority government, that majority government will always get their way, will always pass. They have the power to win any vote that has a simple majority. And this is a resolution that requires a simple majority to pass. And so to reiterate what's already been said, it means in effect that the government, any majority government, but this government has the power, in theory, when it disagrees with something said by a member of opposition who come here on behalf of our constituents, on behalf of Nova Scotians, to test the laws put forward, to test the positions put forward by the government. That is why we are here, to make the laws better. We get precious little opportunity to do that. We were presented with hundreds of pages of legislation today, which will be law next week, probably after all of our children are in bed. That's a bad process, but at least it's a process. If we pass a resolution like this, we don't even have that. Because if the government doesn't like what someone says, well then we don't have to have that conversation because they can remove them. And that is something that should be worrying to anyone who suggests that they are a member of a democratic system, which we all are. And I think it's worth saying, and some examples have been brought up, and we have debated the resolution before, this chamber is not a level playing field. We did celebrate firsts today. We have the first African Nova Scotian woman sitting as a cabinet member, and that is fantastic, and we all celebrate that. We have the first woman speaker in our province, and that is fantastic. And we celebrate that, and we move slowly, and I don't know if there's glass on the floor or glass in the windows, but we are making progress. But that progress is not done. We are not all treated equally. Women are treated still. The cheap shots taken against women are not the same as the cheap shots taken against men in this House. I think most people would agree. And so parliamentary privilege is one of the rules that legitimately and absolutely levels the playing field, because it does in fact apply to everyone equally. And everyone can have their say, and that say is protected, and it must remain protected. The genesis of this conversation and this resolution is sad and terrible, and in my opinion, never should have made it to the floor of this House. But I want to say, and I will recognize that there are members of Can't Buy My Silence in the gallery who are fighting against the misuse of NDAs. And I want to say that if the misuse of NDAs was legislated, if the bill that we have been fighting so hard to pass had been considered by the government, had been passed by the government, we wouldn't be having any of this conversation. And so I think that that's really worth noting. A bill which has been passed in 17 states, which has been passed in Prince Edward Island, which would make it illegal to force a victim to sign a non-disclosure agreement without their consent. That is what is actually at the heart of this conversation. And if that was not legal, we would not be here having this conversation. That bill could have been passed. I am confident in saying that the government would have had the full support of the opposition in this matter. I won't talk about it anymore. I saw the clerk whisper in your ear. Conversely, I do not think that ejecting the member from Cumberland North and preventing her from taking her seat, or even having the specter of that possibility, is the right thing to do. The power that the government holds to censure, as has been discussed in the point of order and by my colleagues, must be used very selectively, ideally only in the case of criminal wrongdoing. As members, we all from time to time feel mischaracterized, hurt, unfairly implicated by the words of others in this chamber, some of us every day, and nonetheless, we persist in doing the work that Nova Scotians elected us to do, the work of representing our constituents, advocating for their hopes, addressing their needs, and trying to remedy their challenges. And it is our position that to prevent another member from doing this is the most serious tool at our government's disposal, and we do not believe it should be used in this case. And we stand to support the point of order and call for the resolution on the order paper to be rescinded. Thank you.
I recognize the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I too want to rise in support of the point of order for the member of Cumberland South. We do worry about the ability of a majority government to enact a censorship motion and eject a member of this House, prevent that member from doing the important work that they have to represent their constituents in this chamber. And again, in this particular case, with one member, this may not be impactful because of the numbers of the majority, but we have had assemblies in this House where there has been very slim majorities. I believe I was part of one. And the impact on removing one vote from this House can be the impact on a confidence motion, can be the impact on the passing of a budget. These are absolutely critical things, and this is more than a slippery slope. This is an act of aggression towards a member, use of overwhelming tactics to silence a member. And the member was speaking about issues that are very important to people in this province. The use of non-disclosure agreements for sexual assault cases. Asking important questions on why this government has not moved forward with this critical piece of legislation. Legislation that we do support, and we want to thank the leader of the NDP for bringing that forward, and also the member from Cumberland South. So when it comes to this particular resolution, we firmly believe that it needs to be struck from the order paper. The member from Cumberland South cannot have a guillotine hanging over her head and serve in this chamber under fear of being censored and expelled because of what she's going to say. It's not only a disservice to her, to all members in this chamber, it is a disservice to the people that duly elected that member to represent their interests and their voice in this House. Thank you very much.
I will take this under consideration and report back at a future date. I call on the Speaker to assume the chair.
At this point in time, I would ask if there are any other notices of motion by any members. No? Okay, we are going to now move into question period. The time is my first one, yes. The time is 3:06. We will conclude question period at 4:01, 3:56. Thank you. Okay. I recognize the Leader of the Official Opposition.
Madam Chair, Nova Scotia is in a full-blown housing crisis. On top of having the highest inflation in the country, the the highest taxes amongst our provinces. We also now have the highest rental increases in the whole entire country, Madam Speaker. Seniors can't afford to downsize, let alone pay their daily bills. Young families are giving up on their dream of owning a home here in Nova Scotia. Students can't find anywhere to live that's close to their universities, Madam Chair, and we've had a drastic growth in the amount of homelessness in this province, particularly over the course of the last year. Yesterday, my colleagues and I held a press conference calling on the Premier to show urgency on the housing file. 4 hours later, they issued a press release saying that they're going to invest in 200 shelter units for Nova Scotians. But, Madam Chair, we have not seen the details of this.
Question?
Nova Scotians need to know if these shelters are going to be in place to save people's lives before winter hits. My question to the Premier is, will they be in place before winter?
The Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And you know, we're concerned about the affordability issues that are facing the province for sure, and the country for that respect. And the member's absolutely right. We see this in housing costs. We see it in general inflation. We see the rising interest rates are having impact. And I take the member's point on the taxes, particularly the carbon tax. The pressure that the carbon tax is putting on Nova Scotians and Canadians is phenomenal pressure it's putting on Nova Scotians, Mr. Speaker. So I do ask, you know, we'll work on the housing file, but there's a number of these things we can work on together. And I ask the members opposite to stand up on that one issue at least and protect Nova Scotians and get that carbon tax.
The Leader on his first supplementary.
Madam Chair, the Premier already failed on his obligation to negotiate a better deal on carbon pricing here in Nova Scotia. What we don't want to see is him fail on delivering on these housing units to homeless people before winter hits, Madam Chair. Mr. Speaker, will the Premier please get up and tell this House if these individuals will be housed before winter hits? Furthermore, will he provide this House with details on the 100 units that allegedly are going to be built outside of HRM? There are hundreds of people from one end of the province to the other, from Sydney to Yarmouth, who find themselves homeless, facing tropical storms, potential hurricanes, and now winter. Can the Premier please tell this chamber where these additional units are going to be built outside of HRM?
The Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm very proud of the work that the Minister for Housing has done on the housing file over investments of almost $300 million in housing. Just this year alone, Madam Speaker, and more to come, of course. But you know, some of these investments in affordable housing, the first investments in affordable housing in 30 years, Mr. Speaker. Madam Speaker, we've been here for 2 years. You know, we're moving forward on some of these files. But for 8 years before that, Madam Speaker, nothing. No investments in, and 4 years before that, Madam Speaker, nothing. No investments in affordable housing. There is work to be done, but we are getting it done on this side of the House, Madam Speaker.
The Leader of the Official Opposition on his final supplement.
Madam Speaker, the Premier inherited a housing strategy. He inherited housing developments that are actually taking place right now. I mean, the Premier has this terrible penchant for taking credit for other people's work and blaming everybody else for his failures, Madam Speaker. And I think that's a real problem. And what this province needs right now is ownership, is leadership from this Premier. We've got 1,000 people in HRM that are homeless. We're heading into winter, and the Premier can't even answer a simple question in this House. Will these shelters be built in time to house these folks before winter hits? Because lives are going to be at stake, Madam Speaker.
Premier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I just want to point out the obvious to Nova Scotians. If that member thinks his government had a housing strategy, that strategy failed miserably, Madam Speaker. We're working hard to pick up the pieces of what we inherited, but we're getting it done. We're getting it done. They can focus on reports and strategies. We focus on action. We get things done. And I would challenge the member one more time to stand up against the Liberal cousins of his in Ottawa on the carbon tax. The carbon tax, the Parliamentary Budget Officer has written a report that the Liberal carbon tax will cost the Nova Scotia economy
I am recognizing that the member has used our parliamentary language I heard it myself. Yes, I heard the word Jesus. And I will be fair, I'll give you a second chance. I would ask that the member apologize and retract that statement. I recognize the honourable member for Hammonds Plains, Lucasville.
Apologize for the use of the language, Madam Speaker, and retract that statement. Thank you.
Thank you. I will give 5 seconds for the Premier to wrap up his comments.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I urge the member's opposite to stand up against the Liberal carbon tax. The Liberal Parliamentary Budget Officer has written a report that says the Liberal carbon tax will cost the Nova Scotia economy just this year $231 million. That's a lot of money for housing, Madam Speaker, that's getting sucked out of the economy for no reason. I ask them to stand up.
I recognize the leader of the New Democratic Party.
Just a reminder that we're talking about housing, and in particular, finding an affordable place to live in this province, which has become like finding a needle in a haystack. According to rentals.ca, the average rent for a one-bedroom apartment in Halifax is now $1,909, and I'll table that. This is an almost 10% jump from last year, similar to the leaps in rental prices in Toronto and Vancouver. And rents are high in communities right across this province. It's not just Halifax. We've been calling on the government to take action to protect tenants and to address the skyrocketing cost of housing to no avail. For every one person outside, there are 10, 20, 50, 100 more just trying to keep a roof over their head. Why does the Premier refuse to protect renters?
The Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and you know, we share the concerns. Nobody likes to see Nova Scotians suffering. We're not in government because we like to see Nova Scotians suffering. Nobody wants to see Nova Scotians suffering. We understand that there are issues facing affordability for many Nova Scotians. That's why we've invested more in rent supplements. That's why we've invested in the first affordable housing. That's why we extended the rent cap regime. That's why we are working on real solutions for Nova Scotians. Is there more work to be done? Of course there's more work to be done. There will always be more work to be done. But we are doing what we can to support Nova Scotians.
Leader of the NDP on her first supplementary.
Madam Speaker, the Premier, in fact, cut the rent supplement program. The Premier also announced 200 units of housing in the face of a deficit of 30,000. So I don't really think it's anything to crow about, and people can't keep up. According to a new report on rental wages, the hourly wage required to afford rent while working a standard 40-hour week, the wage to afford a two-bedroom apartment in Halifax is more than double the minimum wage. Double. The report found that none of Halifax's neighborhoods, none, zero, have affordable rents for a full-time minimum wage worker. Does the Premier think that people should be able to afford an apartment if they work 40 hours a week?
Honourable Premier.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thank the member for the question. This is a serious issue, and it's a serious issue that requires members of this chamber to stick to the facts on things. The rent supplements were not cut, Madam Speaker. In fact, what used to be a program that benefited 5,000 Nova Scotians now benefits somewhere in the range of 8,000 units, Madam Speaker. And Nova Scotians might be familiar with NDP math because we lived through their short term in government, but I will assure Nova Scotians that going from 5,000 supports to Nova Scotians to 8,000 is not a cut.
Leader of the NDP party on their final question.
Thank you. If we're talking about math, it's interesting to have a Premier who's an accountant whose answer to every question about what does it cost is just trust me. But let's talk about rent supplements. In January, the Premier slashed the program from 30% to 50% of a person's income being spent on housing before they qualify. That is punitive, it is terrible, and it has driven people onto the streets. In July, a 2-month subsidy that people actually living on the street could apply to while they search for an apartment was removed with no notice to anyone. All of this despite a budget surplus, let's talk math, of $116 million and no housing strategy in sight. Can the Premier explain why his government insists on making it harder for people to afford a place to live?
The Honourable Premier.
Madam Speaker, the issue is a serious issue. It's one that we're deeply concerned about in government. It's one that doesn't need to be sensationalized with misinformation. The facts themselves are troubling enough, Madam Speaker. But what I would say to the member opposite, the changes to the rent supplement program, didn't put anyone out. They changed the programs going forward so we could support more Nova Scotians. We will continue to invest in Nova Scotians as we have with almost $300 million in affordable housing just this year, Madam Speaker. We'll keep going. We know there's work to be done.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Madam Speaker, the Premier loves to brag about how much money he's spending. But what the Premier can't brag about is improving outcomes for Nova Scotians. And you want to hear some facts. Here's the facts in Nova Scotia. Homelessness nearly doubled over the course of the last 2 years, Madam Speaker. Housing starts are down over 50% since last year. At the same time that the Premier is telling Nova Scotians he's going to double the population. Madam Speaker, we can't even house the 1 million Nova Scotians that live here now. I will table that. The CMHC is telling us that we have to build 70,000 new units in Nova Scotia by 2030 to keep up with demand, at the same time that housing starts are going down, Madam Speaker. 10 cities are popping up across the province. Renters are being priced out of their apartments. Seniors can't afford to downsize, and 1 in 4 millennials believe they'll never be able to afford a home here in Nova Scotia. And yet, Madam Speaker, the Premier would rather point fingers than actually have a strategy. How is he going to double the population when we don't have enough houses for people to live in now?
The Honourable Minister for Labour, Skills and Immigration.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the member opposite for the really important question. And we know that this is a challenging time for many Nova Scotians, but we also have to look to the positive. We need people in this province to solve the housing crisis. We need people in this province to work in healthcare. And the way in which we're going to do that, Madam Speaker, is by bringing Nova Scotians back home with the MOST program. We want to make sure that all Nova Scotians, they thrive in this province, but we know we need to be able to build houses. And Madam Speaker, in order to be able to do that, we have to bring workers into the province too.
The Leader of the Official Opposition on his first supplementary.
Madam Speaker, we want to see the province grow. Growth is good for wealth, it's good for our people, but housing is collapsing under the current pressure of our current population. Housing starts are going down. Homelessness is increasing. And this government does not have a plan to double our population and support it with housing or even more government services. In fact, there's 4 plans that the government is now hiding from the public. The housing assessment report, which tells all the municipalities how much units they need. The student housing strategy, which hasn't been released. The provincial housing strategy that they've been hiding since last spring, Madam Speaker. And then there's the bill that we brought forward to bring in tenancy enforcement that the Premier is still hiding from the public. If this government is so confident in their housing strategy and their plan of action, why won't they share these strategies with the public, Madam Speaker?
I recognize the Honourable Member for Municipal Affairs and Housing.
So, Madam Speaker, I'm happy to have a chance to get in on this debate because as the son of immigrants my parents came here to Canada not speaking a word of English, not having a penny in their pocket, I am shocked to hear the Leader of the Opposition advocate for an anti-immigration policy. I'm just very disappointed to hear that, or to suggest that, or to imply that.
Order. The Honourable Member for Municipal Affairs and Housing has the floor.
2 years, we've had 2 years of absolute action, and I have 10 pages of different things in fine print that we have done. We continue to work. In the last week, we've literally announced an unprecedented build in public housing. We've announced tiny homes. We've announced pallet homes. We've announced changes to our HRM panel, HRM legislation. We've announced many things, Madam Speaker, and we are working, and we'll continue to work. And actions speak louder than words. Let me tell you.
Before we move on to the next question, I do want to acknowledge that there was unparliamentary language used, that using the word hiding is recognized as unparliamentary. So we will, if you would like to retract that statement, and we can move on to the next question. I recognize the Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'll retract that statement and replace it with keeping from the public. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I now recognize the Honourable Leader for Bedford South.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Speaker. For a year now, Madam Speaker, our caucus has been calling for the creation of an enforcement division within residential tenancies, which is an absolutely essential means of helping to solve the crisis of the 300,000 renters that we have here in Nova Scotia. Documents obtained by the CBC, and I will table this, confirm that a report from a consulting firm that this government has hired but has refused to release this report shows that an enforcement division should be created in this province. This is a recommendation that is endorsed by landlord groups, by tenants groups, by everyone in the housing spectrum, and so I would ask the minister responsible, why has he not yet acted on this very important piece of the puzzle?
I recognize the Honourable Minister for Public Service Commission.
Nova Scotia.
Service Nova Scotia, sorry.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and congratulations to you on assuming your role on this historic day. I know you're going to do a tremendous job. To answer the member's question, of course, I know the importance of ensuring that we have a residential tenancy program that meets the needs of both tenants and landlords. That's why we continue as a department to be engaged with both tenant and landlord organizations to hear their concerns. Of course, the creation of a new compliance and enforcement division being one. We know it's complicated, Madam Speaker, but we want to make sure that we get it right. And at the time that we are ready to move forward with legislation, I'll be looking forward to bringing it to the floor of the legislature. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Bedford South.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Again, for a government that is priding itself on action on housing, this has been over a year now that we have seen delay and delay and delay. And the minister talks incessantly about the need to balance the rights of tenants and balance the rights of landlords. And on this issue, they are in agreement. No matter where you look, the tenants and landlords agree that enforcement is an absolutely essential piece of the puzzle. And we're not creating this from scratch, Madam Speaker. Many other provinces have outstanding residential tenancies enforcement systems that we could enact here in Nova Scotia this session. So I'll ask the minister, will he do that this session?
Minister for Service Nova Scotia.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And speaking of keeping from public, I remember my time in opposition as a newly elected member to this House, and talking about a report that the former government was keeping away from the public, and that was the Fitch report, Madam Speaker. So guess what? We commissioned that report by government for government to understand the complexities of creating a new compliance and enforcement division for residential tenancies. As I noted, when we are ready to introduce legislation on the floor of the legislature, I'll be very happy to do so. Thank you very much.
I recognize the member for Bedford South on a new question.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I'll remind everyone that this government is now more than halfway through its mandate. So I think it's time that we start looking forward and talking about what this government is doing and not doing, and being lost in the past, which is becoming less and less relevant as time moves on. But, Madam Speaker, there is no action from this government to help people move out of the rental market and into home ownership. CMHC has said that in Nova Scotia, young people are staying in rentals far longer than they would otherwise due to the unaffordability of homes, and I will table that. Canadian Real Estate Association's home price index for Nova Scotia is up 10% in the past 2 years, and I will table that. The middle class of this province is seeing their dreams of home ownership grow further and further out of reach. Madam Speaker, why is this government not making it a focus to get more Nova Scotians in homes they can afford now? Thank you.
I recognize the Minister for Municipal Affairs and Housing.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, to the member for the question. And the fact is we inherited what I would call an anemic down payment assistance program, which we have enhanced, and we've seen that go. The numbers in the down payment assistance program for first-time homeowners has almost tripled. So that program, but that being said, do we need to do better? Absolutely. Are we concerned about home ownership and wanting to enable home ownership? That is something that we are looking at in many different ways. We want to do that. There's something that's is part of our plan and our agenda. Thank you.
Before we go to your final supplement, I just want to remind members that we are not allowed to be on our phones during question period. Okay, thank you. So the member from Bedford South on your final supplement.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And just to set the context of where we are on housing here in Nova Scotia, year-to-date housing starts are down 31% this year. Rent increased year over year in Nova Scotia 9.5%. 9.5%, the highest rate in the country. As other members have said today, the number of people who are homeless in this city and in this province is up hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. And that's not 8 years ago. That's last year, over the last 12 months. And in the Minister of Finance's budget address this past spring, he spoke glowingly about the housing strategy that was going to be coming in the spring. Well, spring ended about 4 months ago, Madam Speaker, so I would ask the Minister, where is this housing strategy and how can we tackle this problem if we don't know where we're going? Thank you.
Minister for Municipal Affairs, Housing.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, to the member for the question. What I can say is that the previous government strategy was a do-nothing strategy. We are not in that strategy. We're in an action strategy. We're continuing. We have continued to work on the things that we do, and every new thing we do changes, adds to that. So we have a plan in the spring to add to public housing? No, but over the summer we came to the conclusion that we needed to add to public housing. So we continue to adapt and evolve. We'll be known as a party of action, and I look forward to a report card on that in July 15th of 2025. We're looking forward to that report card too.
I recognize the member from Dartmouth North.
Madam Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Housing. Earlier this summer, the first eviction notices were distributed to tenants of Ocean Breeze, a traditionally affordable housing complex in Dartmouth North that is home to over 1,000 residents. You would think that the sale of such a significant piece of real estate would be of interest to a government that wants to protect affordable housing, but FOIPOP shows no records of correspondence between the department and the new owner, and I can table that. In the midst of an affordable housing crisis, Madam Speaker, how is it possible that the minister didn't even reach out to the new developer to make sure that Ocean Breeze residents don't become homeless during this redevelopment?
Minister for Municipal Affairs and Housing.
So, Madam Speaker, I will say to the member that we have a public-facing part of our department, and our senior staff interact with many, many different entities, not only developers, but not-for-profits, community housing groups, many different groups. But the way this works is they approach us. So if we didn't interact with them, they didn't approach us. That's the reality. So we don't go out and approach groups. They come and they approach us. That's how we do it, and we react to that, and they come to us looking for information on programs or whatever they look. So this is how this takes place, and if we have no record of having communication with them, they didn't ask for communication, and all of our information is readily available online and how to connect with us.
Member for Dartmouth North on their final supplement.
With all due respect, Madam Speaker, a government that is all about action on housing seems to have a strange way of approaching that action when they're waiting for people to come to us, sitting back and waiting. Madam Speaker, the developer has been clear that it is open to working with this government to try to maintain affordable housing at Ocean Breeze. After the government didn't act on an opportunity to purchase the site, we were hopeful that the government would step in to make sure that the housing remains affordable. But FOIPOP documents also show that no funding agreements between the government and the new owners of Ocean Breeze exist. Madam Speaker, excuse me, will the minister make a clear commitment that there will be no net loss of affordable housing due to the redevelopment of Ocean Breeze?
Minister for Municipal Affairs and Housing.
So again, I will say, Madam Speaker, that this is a private development, and we will interact if we are asked to interact. I can tell you that we are spending an unprecedented amount of money to preserve affordable housing, and one of the examples I will give you is the CHAP program, which has gotten national recognition, where we have a community housing acquisition program to enable not-for-profits to purchase, and that has preserved and saved hundreds and hundreds of units. So we continue to work in this space. We put almost $300 million into housing this year. We will continue to do that. We will continue to build up community housing and not-for-profit housing, which is something that the Affordable Housing Commission report identified as very weak in Nova Scotia. And as I've said, we're continuing to do an unprecedented step, a historic step of building public housing units in Nova Scotia.
I recognize the honourable member from Sydney, member 2.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I heard something very interesting on the radio today, which was a big concern for me and for many on the island. And today on the radio, we heard that the Minister of DCS say that it was a good question on where the newly announced shelters were going to be in Cape Breton. And that is a very good question, but it's also a concern when one minister of a department doesn't know what's happening with the housing strategy and also with homelessness on the island. We need more shelters in the CBRM, and there's no clarity of what's happening with any of these announcements for the island. And why, and so my question to the minister is, why is the second largest population in the province, in the CBRM, where's the commitment to them, and where are the numbers that we can show the Cape Bretoners that the support is coming from this government?
I recognize the Minister for Community Services.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and just quickly like to congratulate you certainly on your new position, and wish you well in that. And I'd like to thank the member for the question. And certainly, homelessness is a significant issue, and we know that people need a safe and warm and supportive place to live. And what I would say is the announcements that we had yesterday with 200 shelters, 100 of those going across Nova Scotia outside of HRM. We are working hard with our service providers across the province and certainly in CBRM and having those discussions, and they've been ongoing immediately once we were able to work with them. And we'll continue to work certainly with our service providers, and we will have announcements in terms of where those shelters will be going in the near future.
Recognize the honourable member for Sydney, member 2.
I'll give a fellow Cape Bretoner his due. I'm glad that I got to ask him his first question. But this is a concern. This is a concern in the community, and we're seeing it more and more from the government that the CBRM, particularly in trying to get information and trying to get support and trying to get answers when announcements are made by government, the information is spotty at best. The community is the second largest population within the province, and people are struggling in Cape Breton. And I have a documented table that indicates that those experiences of homelessness on the island has doubled in the last year. And I'll table that document, Madam Speaker. Yet, again, we hear another announcement from government, and CBRM is looking for the information on what supports are going to be on the ground for the second largest population in this province. So, my question to the minister is, please today, can he tell us, or are they going to continue to leave Cape Bretoners behind? We need somebody on the government side fighting for the island.
I recognize the Minister for Community Services.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the member for the question. And I would say, you know, we are committed to all Nova Scotians, and we know that a lot of Nova Scotians are struggling with the cost of living, and certainly, you know, with homelessness and our most vulnerable, that is a priority for this government. We've shown it in a number of initiatives that we've announced just this week, but we will continue to have dialogue with our service providers in our communities, you know, in Cape Breton, in Kentville, in Amherst, and we'll continue to work with those partners to make sure that we do the best we can for certainly our most vulnerable people. So thank you.
I recognize the member for Cole Harbour Dartmouth.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and yes, congratulations. That has a nice ring to it. But last fall, CBC News reported that Atlantic Canada saw the largest rent increases in the country year over year, and I'll table that. How can we expect our province to grow and thrive if our young people specifically can't afford to stay here? They contribute to our province in countless ways, but under this government, they are being priced out. Nova Scotia needs youth in order to address major issues such as the labour shortage, healthcare staff, and more, and yet they're feeling left behind. Madam Speaker, will the Minister of Housing and this government take action to ensure that our youth have access to affordable housing, or is this government indifferent to the plight of our youth?
I recognize the honourable member for Municipal Affairs and Housing.
So, Madam Speaker, thank you. I'll thank the member for the question, but say it's a little bit confusing who we're being addressed here. But I do want to bring up one program which I think that we have done, which is very, very applicable to youth, and that is Happy Pad. And I welcome the opportunity to talk about that. We know that because of COVID, the long-standing tradition of Nova Scotia of taking boarders in people's homes really kind of came to a halt because of the fear of infection. Happy Pad is a way of doing that and enabling that to that program. So I just want to highlight that. That's not the only program. We have the most program, More Opportunities for Skilled Trades, which has gotten attention across the nation, which is a historic program bringing young people back here. So we're working very hard to enable young people to have places to stay when they go to university through Happy Pad. We're working hard to have young skilled tradespeople here.
I recognize the member from Cole Harbour, Dartmouth.
Madam Speaker, I look forward to more information on the Happy Pad success. But anyway, the government is failing to see the impact on the cost of living crisis and the lack of affordable housing that it's having on the mental health of our young people. And I'm not going to clarify what age that is. I think we all know. The correlation between mental health and affordable housing is well documented. Madam Speaker, I will ask that the Minister of Housing, do they not see that fixing the healthcare crisis also needs to be fixing the housing crisis? How is this government prioritizing affordable housing for our youth specifically to reduce their anxiety and housing insecurity for their future?
Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing.
So thank you for this question, Madam Speaker. I will say Happy Pad, Happipad. You can find it online. That's if you want more information on that, we're happy to provide that. So in terms of addressing the crisis for youth, yes, we recognize this. And after years of inaction, of doing nothing, we've inherited different areas, I would say, as a government the last 2 years. If I could put a theme on the overall package, is dealing with areas of deferred maintenance in healthcare, in software, and in housing. So we've done a record number of investments in the last 2 years in housing. Do we need to do more? Yes, we need to do more. Nova Scotia is growing at an unprecedented rate. We want to welcome in every new person we can from around the world into this province, and we will fix that. We will solve that crisis.
I recognize the honourable member from Halifax Atlantic.
Congratulations, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this government changed rent supplement program requirements to spending 50% of your income on rent when it was 30%, a significant difference. My question to the Minister of Housing, under the new requirements, how many Nova Scotians have been denied rent supplements?
Honourable Minister for Municipal Affairs and Housing.
So, Madam Speaker, I'll just ask you to rule on that. I have a bill just submitted, so this is not like a year ago. This is a current one on this very topic. So maybe this will be discussed in debate.
We will stop the clock for a moment, and I will take some advisement on this. I do not call that out of order. He wasn't addressing the bill directly, so I will allow the member to proceed, and if the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing would like to answer the question.
Could I have the question repeated?
I recognize the member from Halifax Atlantic.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This government has changed the rent supplement program requirements from 50% of your income to, from 30% to 50%, which is a significant difference. So my question to the Minister of Housing, under these new requirements, how many Nova Scotians have been denied rent supplements?
I recognize the Minister of Housing.
So what I want to say, I thank the member for the question on rent subs, and what I can say is that what we have seen in the rent sub world is this was a program that was started under the previous government. We're starting to change some of the parameters. There was mostly non-portable. Now we've made them portable. It was a cost shared with the federal government. It's gone from now we're 10 million federal money, 42 million provincial money. So what we did was we prioritized the most urgent. We had to decide, do we wait list this or do we prioritize? So we prioritized the more urgent. Recently, we've made more changes to make the Rent Up program more fair to seniors, which is, I believe, a question that I had in the last session from the member from Halifax-Shepparton, actually. So we are listening. We do want to see this program work for Nova Scotians. We have unprecedented success across the country in rent subs. Many other provinces have low uptake on rent subs, interestingly.
I recognize the honourable member for Halifax Atlantic.
I want to thank the Minister for that very detailed answer. Food bank use is at an all-time high, shelters are full, and people are struggling. That's just the facts. According to a study from Food Banks Canada, we are the only province to receive an F in poverty reduction. Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Community Services, what is this government doing to address the housing and cost of living needs of people across the province?
I recognize the Minister for Community Services.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And again, there's no question that the cost of living is impacting many people. And certainly when we get information from organizations like Food Bank Canada, we take that absolutely into consideration and basically enhance our understanding of the challenges that we are facing. As a government, we have made some significant investments to support low-income Nova Scotians over the course of the last 2 years, increasing the Nova Scotia Child Benefit twice, enhancing supports to foster families, and creating and continuing the Seniors Care Grant are just a couple of examples. And certainly, we know there's more to do, and we'll continue to do what we can for our most vulnerable. Thank you.
I recognize the member for Halifax Needham.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and congratulations on the seat. My question is for the Minister of Justice. Last month, the media reported that the Minister of Justice says his government will not ban the use of non-disclosure agreements in cases of sexual assault and harassment, but he cannot explain why. Madam Speaker, I'd like to give the Minister the opportunity to explain why he is not willing to protect people from being silenced by the inappropriate use of NDAs.
The Honourable Minister for Justice.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I do want to take an opportunity to congratulate you as well and Chair on this historic day, and I'm honoured to be here for that. Through you to the Honourable Member, thank you very much for the question. Of course, supporting survivors with sensitivity and respect is important, but we've done a fulsome review. We've looked at other jurisdictions, and we're not moving forward with this at this time. Thank you.
Order. I would like to recognize the member for Halifax Needham.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Canadian Bar Association supports ending the abuses of non-disclosure agreements, and I'll table that. Last month, Halifax lawyer Ron Pink said of the minister's inaction, "This is just a government who doesn't want to protect women on these sorts of matters." I can't imagine who the Minister of Justice is protecting. He's protecting somebody, but certainly not the women of this province, and I'll table that. Madam Speaker, does the minister think the public deserves to know why his government is refusing to protect Nova Scotians from the abuse of NDAs?
I recognize the Minister of Justice.
Thank you again, Speaker, and thank you to my honourable colleague across the floor. We're certainly not looking at taking power away from victims by banning NDAs. Right now, Nova Scotians have options. We're going to continue to make sure that they maintain options, and we won't be taking those choices away, and we won't be moving forward with this at this time. Thank you.
I recognize the Leader of Official Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The answers from the Minister of Justice on this issue are completely insufficient and not acceptable on this issue, Madam Speaker. Non-disclosure agreements are a harmful tool when they're used in the case of sexual assaults, and they're used to protect perpetrators of assault and harm the victims and keep them silent. In fact, the Minister of Justice knows this when he said, and I quote, "I don't support NDAs, and I'll table this, being used as a method to silence victims, but at the same time, we're just not moving forward with this right now." Then at the Public Accounts Committee, we heard from the Deputy Minister who said that the decision to not ban the use of NDAs was a political one. Clearly uncomfortable answering questions on this. So we know the Minister thinks and knows that the use of NDAs in sexual assault are bad for victims, and the Deputy Minister said it was a political decision. So why was that political decision made? This House and the people and the victims in particular need some answers to this question.
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Once again, thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the for the question. As I said before, we did look at other jurisdictions, both across this country as well as throughout the states. We looked at other legislation. We looked at what other provinces have been doing, including Manitoba, who recently had an independent review of the use of NDAs. At the end of the day, we've decided that we're not moving forward with these at this time. Thank you.
The Honourable Official House Leader, or sorry, of the Opposition, sorry.
Again, no sufficient answer to this question. And we sit here in this chamber and have ministers and the Premier brag about being leaders in the country. Nova Scotia was the first to do this, the first to do that, except on this issue. They are satisfied that not enough other provinces are moving forward on this, so they tell us they can't move forward with it as well, without providing any rationale that's sufficient, any explanation to the victims that have had to deal with these NDAs to silence them, and yet they can sit with themselves and be happy about this issue in this chamber, Madam Speaker. It is totally unacceptable. And you know what? I don't blame the Minister for this, because we know who's in charge of the government. It is the Premier. So I have to ask the Premier, why are the use of NDAs for sexual assaults still being allowed in this province?
I recognize the Minister of Justice.
Yes, thank you again, Speaker, and thank you once again for the question. As I've said before, I'll say again, there are two sides to every story. We do want to make sure that Nova Scotians, victims, do have options within this province, and we've heard from people who are a little less vocal in regards to this, who have actually expressed that NDAs have been beneficial to them. They've expressed that to us, and we're certainly don't want to remove those options from them, so we're not moving forward. Thank you.
I recognize the Leader of the Official Opposition on a new question.
Madam Speaker, the Minister just said there's two sides to one story, to a story. Does he not understand that the use of NDAs prevent one of those sides from actually coming forward? Madam Speaker, that's the issue here. It's about hearing that side of the story of the victims. And again, why can't this government provide us rationale on this? There is not a sufficient explanation that's being given to this House. This is a serious issue that has affected probably countless, primarily women in this province, and yet all we hear is, well, other provinces aren't doing it, so we're not going to do it either. This is not acceptable. We need to have a real explanation for this. Table the environmental scan and explain to this House why Nova Scotia cannot be a leader on the banning of use of NDAs for sexual assault.
I recognize the Minister of Justice.
Yes, thank you again, Chair. Madam Speaker, and as I said previously, we did look across the country. Manitoba Law Reform Commission recently recommended against legislation of this type. The only province within this country currently is PEI. Private member bills that have been put forward similar to PEI's on Ontario, Manitoba, BC, and even in the Senate so far have not passed. We will continue to keep an eye on this, but we're not moving forward at this time. Thank you.
I recognize the Leader of the Official Opposition on your final slip.
Madam Speaker, if the Minister wants to expand his view on jurisdictions that have actually banned the use of NDAs, he can look to the 17 states in the U.S. that have banned them. He can look to the leadership of PEI. He can look to the bar association here in this province. And again, I can't believe that the minister has conviction on this, because we're certainly not seeing it today. And we're certainly not giving an explanation. Okay, there's other jurisdictions that haven't done this. Why is that good enough for this minister in this House and this government?
I recognize the Minister of Justice.
Yes, thank you, Speaker. Speaker, no one is forced into signing NDAs. It is an option that is available to Nova Scotians, and we're not going to look at taking those options away. Thank you.
I recognize the honourable member for Bedford Basin. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I want to join my colleagues in welcoming you to the chair. It's about time.
Yes.
Anyway, back to NDAs. Canadian Bar Association has, in fact, recommended that we move forward with this kind of legislation. So when the minister lists, oh, well, nobody else is doing it, what he doesn't tell you is who is recommending it, who is doing it. 17 states in the United States. PEI, Canadian Bar Association. Are you telling me that's reason enough that because other provinces aren't doing it, that we shouldn't do it? It does not make sense.
Question.
And it silences women.
Is there a question?
Silencing women.
Could you repeat your question? Okay. The Minister of Justice.
Yes, thank you very much, Speaker. And once again, as I said before, we feel that this actually provides options, and we're not going to limit options of women either.
The honourable member for Bedford Basin.
I want to let the Justice Minister know that many of us have talked to people who have been silenced by NDAs, or people who have actually chosen not to go forward with cases because they were going to have to sign an NDA. I know one woman who said, I can't do this because I won't be able to talk to my husband about this. I won't be able to talk to anyone about this. NDAs silence women, they silence victims, Madam Speaker, and I want the minister to tell us why is the rights of one group, wealthy white males, more important than the rights of women and victims of sexual assaults.
I recognize the honourable member, Minister of Justice.
Yes, thank you very much, Speaker. As I've said, we're not moving forward with these at this time. Thank you.
I recognize the leader for the New Democratic Party.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am reluctant to stand and again pose a question to a minister who refuses to offer the members in this chamber and all Nova Scotians an answer as to why here in Nova Scotia, which I will remind the members is the site of so much scandal that took place in Hockey Canada. We're not just talking about women, we're talking about children.
Yes.
We're talking about athletes. We are talking about people right across this province who, in direct contradiction to the minister's statement, are absolutely forced to sign things, are absolutely dealing with a gross imbalance of power. Why won't the minister protect Nova Scotians and ban the misuse of NDAs?
I recognize the Minister of Justice.
Thank you again, Speaker. And Speaker, I have given an answer to this a couple of times now, and I recognize that some of the members opposite don't like that answer, but I have provided it, and we won't be moving forward with this legislation at this time. Thank you.
I recognize the leader of the New Democratic Party on your final supplement.
We disagree all the time in this chamber, but we owe each other reasons. We have a government that has made a decision which is controversial and in our opinion is wrong, and refuses to disclose the reasons for that decision. It's embarrassing, it's shameful, and it leads to the conclusion that there is a reason that they don't want to share. I will ask one last time, what is the explanation?
Order, order. The time allotted for QP has now ended. We will take a short recess. Order. I would ask the members to please take their seats. I recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. That concludes government business for the day. I move the House to now rise to meet again on Friday, October 13th, between the hours of 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. Government business will include second reading of 319, 320, 321, 322, 323, 327, and 329.
The motion is that the House rise to meet again on Friday, October 13th from 9 to 5. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Aye. Contrary minded, nay? Did I? No. The motion is carried. We stand adjourned until Friday, October 13th, between the hours of 9 and 5. Awful.